Hi, today I'd like to show you some Anglo Saxon coins. So they're from sort of the 900s and the 1000s. Now, at this period, the only coins that were issued were silver pennies. This is an example. And they were hammered coins. That means they were hit between two dies. There was a die at the bottom and a die at the top. A piece of silver was put between them that was cut in the rough shape of the coin, and then they were hit very hard with a hammer, and the indentation of the dies was then put into the silver. Now this could mean that if the bit of silver coin moved very slightly, that it would have struck in the wrong position, so it wouldn't be completely in the middle, it would have been off center. It could have been that when they did the strike, it only hit a small bit and then they had to restrike, and often they lined it up, but it wasn't completely lined up, so you've got this sort of mismatch of lines, so it looks like it's a double strike. And so this wasn't a very good way of producing coins, but that was the way that they did it at that time, because that was all their ability. From about 1700, you start to get milled coins. So up to 1700, all the coins were mainly struck this way. And then after about 1700, they started to use a industrial process of milling. So it was actually done on a lathe, and they were able to cut out them very distinct shapes. And on the edges, they would put these lines, so that the problem with the hammered coins is you could easily cut off bits of the silver and not be noticed. So people could then cut off these small bits of silver off the ends of the coins, and people wouldn't notice because the coins weren't completely round. There was no edge to them. And this happened where there was clipping done, where people clipped off bits, and then eventually they had enough silver to make their own silver coin, or just use it as silver ingot. So that was a problem with hammered coins. So you've got here my earliest coin of this period, which is Edgar, and he reigned from 959 to 975. I think you can just see on the side there, it says Edgar and then Rex, Edgar King. This was very standard size of coin. Now I believe that the word pound means you had a pound of silver, so it was supposed to be that this number of coins, which would be 240 coins, would make a pound of silver. But there was no pound coins. The only coins they made was these pennies. And there's the detail on the other side. So that one was 959 to 975. 959 to 975. And he was King of England, and he became a king at the death of his brother. His reign was peaceful, as it was in a lull between the Viking raids. So Vikings had been raiding the British shores for a number of years before, and they started again after it. But during this period, it was a quiet period. The next king we got here is Ethelred II. There's his portrait. He reigned from 978 to 1016. So quite a long reign. He was also known as Ethelred the Unready, because unready meaning that he was ill-advised, he had bad counsellors. And it also was a pun on his name, because Ethelred means sort of well-advised. Now, his reign was interrupted by a number of Danish raids, so there was constant war there. That's the other side, which has a cross, small cross. A different type, this one. Same king. Sorry, shouldn't have shown you that one. It's this one. Another one. What is this one? Yeah, Colchester. You can just see the letters C-O-L-E down the bottom there. So it's Colchester mint in England. There's various mints that they made these from. Where is he? Where's the good sign of his... Well, that's it, like this. So you can just about see his head there, and he's got a scepter in front of him. So you can see the head with a scepter and a sort of a crown type thing at the back. Again, there's another one. Again, he's got the scepter in front of him. And a small cross there. These are short crosses. Later on they put long crosses, which helped define where the coin ended, so stopping clipping. Again, you've got a small cross there. And again, another picture of him there. And lastly, this last one, we've got a sort of a full head there, very stylized hair, a bit of a hairstyle going on there. You can just see Ethelred name. And on the other side, it's got more of a long cross, so it actually goes right to the ends of the coin, and it's got some dots around the end, again, to prevent people clipping off bits of coin. And then after the Danish raids, we actually got a Danish king who joined in. He was Canute. Let's get his head around there. So here's Canute, the Danish king of Britain. Now he reigned in Britain, or England anyway, from 1016 to 1035. And this one's also of Colchester. He was also king of Denmark and also of Norway eventually. And he married Emma of Normandy. So he already had a wife, but in those days, if you took over lands, it was intended that to secure your position, you married into a royal family of the area. Now, Emma of Normandy was the widow of King Ethelred. So it linked in England to Normandy, and so it came with this Norman link that eventually came out in the Battle of Hastings between William of Normandy and Harold of England. Now, Harold was Ethelred's brother-in-law, so again it's a family feud between the two. But that is Canute. He was famous, or supposedly famous, for going to the water and sitting down and telling the water to, or the sea to go back. Supposed to be part of this idea that he commanded all the water in the area because of his large empire. That was based on maritime, because there's the North Sea dividing Denmark, Norway and England. But it's got quite a beaky nose, I think, on that one. The other side. we've got quite a refined cross. So even the Danish use the same coinage as the Anglo Saxons. Here again we've got another one, not very clear. And this one, I think it is him sitting. I think it's supposed to be like that. Oh yeah, you can just about see his. It's very similar to the earlier ones, under Ethelred with a portrait and him holding his scepter. You can just about see that scepter and the portrait. So very similar to bringing on the tradition of the Anglo Saxon coinage, small coin. There was only the penny was the only thing that was minted. That was any coin. Now later on, again this is Canute. You can see his, and he was from 1016 to 1035. Again you can see him with a crown, quite a beaky nose. And again that looks very similar to an Ethelred type of coin. And eventually during the Norman period, when coins were becoming much more in circulation and used much more for trade, these lines in the cross were used to cut the penny in half, and so you'd had half a penny. So instead of having a penny, which was still in those days quite a big lot of money, and if you wanted to get a few eggs, you didn't want to hand over a whole penny, you only needed a small part of a penny. So these were cut in half to make half pennies, and then those halves were cut again to make quarters or farthings. So these crosses were used in a way to cut the coins, to break them down into half pennies and quarter pennies if you just wanted to use it just for a few eggs or a very small item for small change. And those sort of coins you can find quite cheaply. So if you want a very cheap medieval coin, then go for a farthing or a halfpenny. And so often you can get quite nice ones, and you can tell the king from the small bit of evidence you got on it. So those are, if you want a cheap way of getting a medieval English coin, then goes for those. You can get those for £7 or £8, some of them. Right, the next one is Harold I, also known as Harold Harefoot, because he was supposed to be very nimble on his feet. Now, he was a son of Canute, and he was the son of the first wife of Canute, but he didn't last very long. It was only 1035 to 1040, and he was succeeded by his half-brother Harthacnut. So again, you got this stylized look. But this one, fairly smaller type of, again, very elaborate cross. So again, there was much more of a Scandinavian influence. Now, if Harold had won at the Battle of Hastings instead of William, England would be much different today. It wouldn't have had so much. Here again we've got a picture of Harold I. We would have been linked much more to Scandinavia. Our language would be much more Germanic, much more Scandinavian influence. We wouldn't have had the influence of France. We would have looked more towards Scandinavia and the north, rather than after William took over. He introduced a lot of nobles. A lot of those nobles had land in France, and so England got enmeshed in French politics and wars. Again, we've got the cross there. So Britain at 1066 suddenly changed from being a Scandinavian country to a more southern link to France and enmeshed in French politics. This one is of Edward the Confessor. So he was from 1062 to 1065. Sorry, 1042 to 1066. And on his death, that's the problem, because he didn't have any children. They call him Edward the Confessor because he's supposed to be very pious. They think that might be why he didn't have any children. So on his death, the throne was vacant, and then there was this internal battle between William of Normandy, who had the Norman connection with Emma of Normandy, and you got Harold, who was Edward the Confessor's brother-in-law, both saying that Edward the Confessor had told them that they were the legitimate heir. So William had a Anglo Saxon linkage as well. The Normans were also from, because Normandy comes from Northmen, so they were from Scandinavian origins, though they took on French influence during time. So even though William was a Norman and a Norman French, there is again a Scandinavian link to both sides. Here again we got one of Edward the Confessor. Again we got very similar look with the king with his scepter, the royal scepter. You can just see Edward up there. And again, the cross, very Christian thing with some, usually they had the mint mark around the edges here, but very similar. And then we have William himself. Look, see if we can find him. There we have him facing you with his crown on, and again with the royal scepter. The scepter was much more of a sign of kingship than today. And on the other side we have this cross with some lettering. So again, they didn't change that much. The size, shape, and the decoration was not changed in a couple of 100 years. They carried on this very simple, and this also carried on into the Norman period. So right up to really the Tudors, the coinage didn't change that much. They did introduce a groat or 4 pennies and a 2 penny and a halfpenny, but during the Edwardian period, that's from Edward I up to Edward IV, but they always had these pennies that were very similar in style and shape. So I hope that gave you an insight into the coinage of the Anglo Saxons up to the Norman conquest. Please give this a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't. It all helps. And I'll come back to you soon with some more coins of England and Europe and the world. Okay, thank you very much for watching. See you. Bye.